live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this Thursday edition of the Watchdog. My name is William Voko, and on the show tonight, blame the electricity crisis on high-level decisions made in the dark. That's what fire-spitting Eskom workers told 3 parliamentary committees today. The committees are currently on an oversight visit at the utilities headquarters. We speak to the chairperson of one of the committees, Kaya Makakla, as well as the unions. A shocking revelation by the Public Service and Administration Minister that the state has almost 2,000 unqualified top public servants, each earning upwards of 1 million rands each a year as directors general, deputies, and chief directors. Those stories coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. As various stakeholders grapple with South Africa's intensifying energy crisis, 3 portfolio committees are currently on an oversight visit to Eskom. Earlier this week, the power utility told Scopa that they would not give a definite date on when load shedding would end. Organized labor made representations today before the 3 committees, and joining me now are representatives of the 3 unions represented at the utility. Helga Crenier is Public Sector Deputy General Secretary of Solidarity. Dr. Mofokeng is the NUM's Acting Energy Sector Coordinator. We also have NUMSA's spokesperson, Pagamile Hlubi Majola. Good evening to all of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Will.
Good evening.
Evening, host.
Tell us, very briefly, Pagamile, if I may start with you, the nub of what it was that you really needed to tell these committees today.
Good evening, Vuyo, and thank you so much for having me on your show. If I have to summarize what NUMSA's presentation was today, it really was very, very simple. We went there to make it very clear that the crisis of load shedding can be solved if we do the work of implementing quality maintenance at all our power stations, number 1. Number 2, stop prematurely shutting down power stations. This has a direct impact on our power supply. And thirdly, one of the lies which we sought to deal with was the lie that renewable energy independent power producers can take us out of load shedding. And I think we were quite effective in painting the picture of pointing out that other developed nations are still relying on either coal or gas or nuclear as a base load. They do not rely wholly on renewable energy. Why are we as a developing nation with an abundance of coal rushing to transition to renewable energy when it's not going to solve load shedding, when it's not going to deal with our energy supply crisis? We use Germany as an example. Germany is a country that, even though it has taken a decision to drive renewable energy, it has 120,000 installed megawatts of RE. It has fallen back on coal because of the fact that it's in order to guarantee energy supply. South Africa, on the other hand, is busy shutting down coal-fired power stations, which is a senseless decision. And that was really what we wanted to emphasize, was that what we need from the committee is to assist us to force government, the board of Eskom, Eskom management, to act in the interests of the people of this country and to stop driving their own personal selfish interests by, telling us about a solution that frankly will not assist us in the crisis that we're facing today.
Helga, for you, what were the main issues?
For us, it was more a question of what we should start doing at this stage. I think there's a lot of talking going on. There's a lot of politics behind the scenes. But for us, it's simple. I think the problems at Eskom is clear. Most people know what the problems are. I think people want to simplify the problems because it makes it easier to solve. But once you start doing that and you don't solve the issues, all the issues, then you won't stop load shedding. So for us, it's basically our argument is that everybody knows the problems. We need to start fixing those problems. We, as opposed to NUMSA, basically supports renewable energy, but I think to the extent that it should not replace Eskom power. We agree, we should not close power stations prematurely, and it should be an energy mix at the end of the day. And we believe that private or independent renewable energy producers might be able to make up for what we don't have in Eskom currently. The fact of the matter is we don't have enough energy at this stage, and we need more. A lot of the problems that will be solved at Eskom might not happen quickly, and we are of the view that if the right policy framework is created to allow private energy producers to enter the market quickly and swiftly, it might assist in alleviating the load shedding problem.
For you, Doctor?
Evening, Vuyo and your listeners. Well, NUM is so clear on their position in regard to no support to any closure of any power station, more especially in this crisis moment. And NUM is opposingly to unbundling. As always, you can remember the demonstration we had previously for the past years that we are opposing this because the focus of the problem in Eskom, the unbundling won't solve any problem. They won't take us out of debts. They won't stop load shedding. Now we are opposingly to that. When it comes to greener or any renewables, we are in support of any mixed energy, but we don't take renewables as an alternative for replacing coal power stations. Because remember, we're dealing with the base load, and that is why when you keep those power stations, they might be used in future. And we still believe that the issue of aging of power station is just a myth, because anything can be regenerated and anything can be renewed. And this thing of keep on saying because the power stations are old, we need to close. Look at Kuber. We managed to extend its lifespan, and so why can't we do the same with the power stations, more especially in these times of crisis? Thank you.
Now, Phakamile, I mean, both you and, if I may just pick up on a point that Doctor just made, you raised in your presentations quite forcefully this issue of the age of power stations not being an issue. Is it your sense that it is being made an issue when it is not, or were you just talking about all the problems you had identified?
No, absolutely. It's very obvious that this issue of the so-called aging power stations is being used as an excuse to justify the premature closure of power stations. What we said in our presentation is that a power station is like a house, okay? So you have houses which are over 100 years old, but those houses are still livable as long as you maintain them. You can replace the roof, you can replace the windows, you can replace the geyser, but the house, the structure is still usable. And this is the case with the power station as well. You simply need to maintain it properly so that you can use it for a long period of time. I mean, it's a massive investment as it takes years to build. We reject this false lie. It's a lie, really, that we are being fed in the media, that the power stations are old and therefore they're not performing. It's an excuse used by a weak CEO who doesn't understand what quality maintenance of power stations is. The fact of the matter is Kuberg's lifespan was extended by 20 years. The very same power stations that Germany has reopened and fired up, some of them are older than our power stations, but they are operating. And the fact of the matter is that we have a power supply crisis in this country. Why are we not reopening the power stations, reconnecting all the units which were shut down? Just recently, President Ramaphosa was, I think he was speaking in the media or addressing the public over the weekend, and he claimed that power stations are not being shut down. That's not true. units have been shut down since 2017. Last year, they closed down Komati, which provides 1,000 megawatts of energy. What kind of senseless decision is this by a government that claims it cares about resolving energy, that they could actually be so reckless as to shut down power stations at this time when we desperately need all the power that we can get? And we emphasized this point to the portfolio committee. We showed them evidence of this. We even showed them examples of Germany's use of energy. The fact that even though Germany really has been driving renewable energy, and of course they should, they are not depending on it. They are depending primarily on coal, nuclear, and gas in order to fulfill their energy needs. So we really have to be realistic as a country. We understand that climate change is a crisis, but you're not going to solve the climate change crisis by deepening poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And if we are talking about a just transition, then a transition from coal to renewable energy should be done at a pace that the country can afford, and it should be done for the benefit of the majority of people. And right now, this government is not following that principle.
Now, Doctor, I mean, if I'm trying to go back to conversations I've been, or some of the conversations I've been listening to over the past few weeks, especially since the beginning of this year, whether it was the ANC putting together a panel discussions, or whether it was some of the people who are actually advising or in some way or the other involved in trying to find solutions. I'm thinking here specifically about the point that Pagamile just raised, which is the power stations that both of you believe are being closed down prematurely. The point, or among the points that these experts were making, was that yes, and that indeed is the fact, these power stations could be or should be giving us a lot more than they're able to at the moment. But the biggest problem has been that over the years there was simply no maintenance. As a result, if for example, from the time they were set up, they were then maintained regularly the way they should be, they would still indeed be giving us a lot more than they are giving us at the moment, and that is the nub of it. In other words, they have to be shut down at some point, if I got the argument correctly, so that you need to then do a lot more work to bring them, to a point where you can then start with regular maintenance. The reason they're breaking down often right now is because for many, many years, they were simply not maintained.
Well, Vuyo, you tell me when you are crying loud that there's lack of maintenance, whereas you have certain units next to each other that were pulled on coal reserve, which they were not used. Now they were stripped off, taking parts to other power stations. Then you are putting an excuse of saying, no, we can't maintain. Because they have a lot of time. There was a reason why they were on coal reserve. To say in times of emergencies, you can just light up, then you have your backup. But that is just an excuse of saying, because if you look at the financial statement of Eskom, there's always budget for maintenance and a huge budget. Now you can't say now because we are in this time of crisis, because the whole purpose or the whole lead is all about closing down or moving away from coal power station as a compliance or making those international countries happy. Is not to say you can't maintain anything, because if you needed more time to maintain power, certain units or power station in the same power station, they are not used. They are vacant as we are talking. Now, on our plan or immediate reaction that the government needs to take a decision on is to bring back those units that are put on coal reserve. While they are able to bring them back, give them a full maintenance, then when they start working, then they can go back to those who are existing now and try to maintain them. It's simple as that.
Helgat, when you say I mean, you also say that much as you support renewables, but like everyone else among your worker colleagues, they should not replace Eskom. And you're also saying, as both NUMSA and the NUM are saying, don't close power stations prematurely. But then you went on to talk about the right policy. Is it your sense or belief that the problem with the much talked about energy mix is that it is not based on sound, or, to use your word, right, the correct policy framework?
Look, I think the point that we try to make is currently there's a lot of red tape. You cannot earn if you supply power to a certain extent. There's no tariffs for individuals that want to pump renewable energy back into the grid. And if you determine those tariffs and you pay people to supply energy in private individuals, they might be able to put more power into the grid than we expect, And I think that's what we are saying is there's a lot of red tape. Yes, there has been some policy framework movements over the last couple of months, which is very positive and which excites us. I think part of the problem, however, is we don't see these people coming into the mix. And Solidarity last week basically did a PIA application to NERSA to understand how many applications for private power generation is currently in the pipeline, why they are taking so long. So there isn't transparency with regard to that, and that's a policy framework that we believe should change. Whether renewable energy should replace coal-fired power stations is a discussion for the long run. We're talking about the just energy transition, power stations that's going to be shut down over the next 10 to 15 years. But we have a very real, very current crisis, and that is a load shedding issue. And that needs to be addressed over the short term. So for us, it's two separate issues. And we believe that by allowing individuals to put power back into the grid, that we might, ease the pressure on Eskom.
Well, let's take your very last point, because this is what is everyone's focus right now. In other words, how do we get out of the mess we are in right now? And everyone agrees that renewables are part of the equation or the solution. But virtually every expert who's come on this program tends or agrees that renewables, as things stand, renewables won't solve our current problems. So where do you stand with regard to that? In other words, what will take us out of this crisis right now, or as soon as possible?
Look, it should be a double-edged sword. You cannot just rely on renewables, and that's why we say yes. To a certain extent, we agree with NUMSA. The coal-fired power stations needs to be maintained properly, which isn't happening. There's many reasons for that. Many of those reasons have been debated for hours on end. The fact of the matter is it should be a combined approach. Yes, we aren't saying renewables alone will be the solution to the problem, but it should be part of the solution. You said it earlier, that it should be a part of the solution. It's not the solution, and I think that's the point that we are trying to make is this is not a simplistic problem. Our current crisis is not a simplistic problem. There's a lot of different angles that one can look at it. All the different issues should be addressed. You will not address one issue and then alleviate the current crisis. And that's the point, I would also like to refer back to Vietnam. Vietnam basically solved a very similar problem to ours with very simple policy framework changes by their government, which allowed individuals to basically generate power on their rooftops and put that back into the grid. So yes, I don't think it's the only part of the solution, but it can definitely contribute, and that's what we are trying to push for.
Of course, Pagamila, you did talk about some of the people, leading Eskom at the moment and how this whole crisis is being managed. Your presentation suggests that you don't believe that it is being managed properly. At times we're being lied to use your words. Tell us why you think that is the case and why you told the committee that that is your take or assessment of how Eskom in particular, the Eskom management or leadership is managing the crisis.
Well, we were very clear that, first of all, at the helm of Eskom, at the level of the GCO and the COO, you really need people who actually understand what they're doing. And the analogy that we used in our presentation was that in the form of the GCO, Andre de Ruyter, we must never ever make the mistake of hiring someone who has no background in energy, state-owned entities or engineering to run a complicated firm like Eskom. And an example we used was, even though de Ruyter is a lawyer, okay, which means he's a specialist in the legal framework, he's not a power station specialist. And because of his ignorance around basic things in terms of what's needed for proper quality maintenance, it's very easy for him to fail on delivering quality maintenance because he doesn't know what it's supposed to look like. I mean, if you've got a brain tumor, Vuyo, do you go and get a dentist to operate on you? No, you don't. A dentist is a specialist in teeth. You hire a neurosurgeon. And we were very clear that the parliamentary committee must compel the board to hire the right person, somebody who's got the right qualifications, who's got experience with energy generation, who understands power stations. We were very clear that this person should be black, because we are a country where the majority of people are black and these skills and expertise do exist. There was a time when we actually did get a handle on load shedding under the leadership of Matsela Koko and Brian Molefe. This is something that many people in the media want to pretend is not true, but these are facts. And it speaks to the fact that there's a culture or a history of people who can do this. And frankly, under Matsela Koko's leadership, one of the things that they did extremely well was to decentralize this issue of the power stations and allow the power station managers to assist in increasing the energy availability factor. Their key performance indicators was actually based on whether they could increase the energy availability factor. And we should go back to that practice so that we can hold power station managers responsible or accountable for ensuring that we have the consistent energy supply.
Okay.
Secondly, we have to be very clear that NUMSA supports a just transition. But what's happening in South Africa is not a just transition. Africa contributes less than 4% of the carbon which is responsible for climate change. Those who are responsible for climate change, namely America, Europe, the UK, China, those are the ones who've contributed to this crisis.
Okay.
So why is South Africa rushing ahead of Western Europe to forego coal and depend on renewable energy when they're not doing that? Okay. They're the ones who have messed up the environment, and they should carry the full burden of that, not a developing country like ours with an unemployment rate of 44% and the highest inequality in the world. That is not a just transition.
Okay, after all was said and done, Doctor, did you get a sense that the three parliamentary committees that listened to all your presentations heard you?
Definitely, Vuyo, because remember now, we have structures within and forums within the same Eskom, which are dysfunctional. Now, when you get the chance, like those committees, you are directly talking to the public because they represent the public. And the sense we get that they listen to us and they took all our points, and they will also intervene where we told them to intervene. And they will also ask the same executive, what are the challenges, whereas we pose a different picture and certain solutions. And so we believe that the portfolio committees will do as they are elected for, and they will also help the community to understand that the problem in Eskom is not as deep as is portrayed, that is so big that it can be sorted out.
Let me thank all three of you for coming on the program this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representatives of the three unions that are currently operational at Eskom. They briefed the three parliamentary committees that are on a fact-finding mission at Eskom. Today was, of course, the first day. They'll be meeting several other stakeholders over the next couple of days. In a minute, we speak to the chairperson of one of the committees to get their sense of what they were able to pick up and where this process, or how this process is going to unfold to what end. That's coming up in a minute. Don't go away. The Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises is only one of the three oversight bodies currently on a visit to Eskom headquarters. Joining me now is Kaya Makagla, who is the chairperson of the committee on the National Assembly Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, sir.
Well. I mean, there have been debates this week about whether we still need fact-finding missions instead of getting on with the crisis the country is facing.
Well, unfortunately, for one to act has to be fit in terms of acquiring information. It's difficult to resolve a problem if you have areas where you're not sure of.
What are you still unsure about?
Well, today the Portfolio Committee of Public Enterprises, including the Mineral Resources and Energy, joined by a Select Committee on Public Enterprise, had to have a session with the stakeholders, particularly unions, that are operating at Eskom. And because we anticipated that we are not sure of the relationship between the executive and the union, and also whether they are in the same wavelength in terms of understanding what the executive and the board is intending to do. Therefore, we felt that it's important to listen to them, because in the end of the day, they are the people who are actually doing the work at the ground level, at the power station level. Therefore, our meeting was to get information from them in terms of what are their resolve in relation to deal with the current energy shortage in the country as workers of those unions. Mind you, those are big unions such as your National Union of Mine Workers, your National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, and Solidarity. Those are the bigger unions.
Did they tell you anything you hadn't heard before, or that today was perhaps particularly interesting?
Well, the unions addressed the broad issues in their view that the situation that contributed to the problem are those that they think, to them, they are very important, such as the energy generation plants, that they think that they are not utilized maximum, and also the skill shortage and the role of private companies in the alleged sabotage at the power station level, the unwarranted mothballing of coal power station, etc. All those issues, they have their subjective understanding of those problems. And to us, as people who are playing an oversight role, those are very important issues that you cannot leave.
Let's talk about what they told you about the role of private companies, because that's an issue I didn't canvass with them a short while ago. What did they tell you, or what were their concerns about the role that private companies contracted to Eskom, including those that are not, are playing in this crisis?
Well, I think they do agree in a certain extent with the executive that these companies tend to want to get more jobs. And by doing that, for example, a company is awarded a contract of a year, and towards the end, they realize that they have to leave, and they will try to create a job for themselves by sabotaging some of the plants or some of the units in order for them to be kept there.
But then,
I think
yes, you can continue.
I'm saying I think it's something that even the board, including the executive, suspect that it does happen.
But then, I mean, every business, would want more. Isn't the question what those in charge at Eskom are doing about that? How they stop unscrupulous players from wanting, unfair advantages over others, or trying to get contracts or better and bigger contracts by, defrauding the system or doing wrong things? Isn't that the issue more than the intention, of these players? In other words, are they able to, or why aren't they able to stop them?
Well, to them, it's the responsibility of the executive. Theirs is to execute their work, and they also blame them that perhaps if they were recruiting right people in the sense that people who are loyal to South Africa as a nation or as a country, people who are having some kind of a belief that we need to develop this country as an economic viable country, a country that attracts investment, wouldn't be able to do such dirty work. The fact that they always contract companies that have no sense of ubuzwe in terms of their conduct. That's why they are blaming the executive for recruiting such kind of companies.
But did you get a sense, when I talk about ubuzwe, that these workers are actually very genuine? They are concerned about the crisis we are in as everybody else, and they are as committed to finding very real practical solutions as everyone would want to. And I'm asking this against the backdrop of previous utterances that were made by some members of the executive that these are a bunch of very insincere people who threaten others who don't agree with them, and they're not in it for all the good and noble reasons. What was your sense?
Well, from where I stand as a person who is part of the legislative arm of the state, we won't be in a position to start judging people without any facts. At the moment, we give everybody, including them as an executive and the board, a benefit of the doubt until there is a reason for us to suspect that their information is not sincere. From what we heard from them, there is no way that we can doubt that particular information until it's tested otherwise.
Now, you are going to meet with other stakeholders, including, the Eskom leadership. Will you be meeting with some of the private companies playing in the space, those who have contracts and those who don't have contracts but have very vested and direct interests in what is going on there? In fact, more importantly, in resolving our electricity crisis.
Well, the reason that we actually had to leave some of the responsibilities that we're supposed to be doing in this period before the opening of Parliament and to embark on this oversight trip is precisely because of our tiredness and our frustration with the continuous experiencing of load shedding in the country. That is devastating the economy and every household. is precisely because we want this issue to be resolved. We are going to the executive tomorrow in order to ask questions, and we would like to get answers in those questions. And we'll also use the same information we get from the unions in order to ask them, because one of the reasons that I said to you, we've got no reason to suspect perhaps that those questions might not be legitimate. It's precisely because we would like the executive to give us a reason that we might not trust if perhaps they are not taking those questions. But our aim is to see load shedding leaving us. We want to live in a South Africa free of load shedding. If there is a load shedding, we will be more comfortable with the level 1, stage 1. Anything beyond that is a crisis that has to be resolved. Therefore, us as a legislative arm of the state, we would like to put pressure on the executive not to deliver us out of load shedding tomorrow or 2 years to come as early as yesterday. That's why we are here before the SONA.
In fact, you bring me to a point I raised last night after playing a clip from the Public Enterprises minister, who was saying that, they're talking about a period of 2 years, but also talking about shortening that period. Have you given yourselves, as the legislature, timelines to say we need to do ABC by such and such a time?
Well, we have not concluded to a particular date, but having sit in parliament caucuses of the ANC, having heard the attitude of the ANC as an organization towards this, having experienced also the interaction with a number of stakeholders, I think, and including the members of these committees I've just mentioned, the attitude is that there's no way that we can wait for years for this. This load shedding has to end, and has to end this year. As to when this year, I think it's going to be determined by the information we will get.
Okay, we'll see what comes out of your process. Let me thank you very much, Mr. Makaxwa, for agreeing to come on this evening. He's, of course, the chairperson of the National Assembly committee responsible for the place oversight for the Department of Public Enterprise. We move to this now. A shocking revelation yesterday by the Public Service and Administration Minister, Thulas Nxesi, that the state has almost 2,000 unqualified top public servants who are earning upwards of 1 million rands each as either directors general, deputy directors general, chief directors, those like the topmost layer of the public service. The SABC's Lulama Maitya filed this report based, of course, on a written question that was sent to the minister by a member of the opposition, the Democratic Alliance.
Reactions.
Minister Nxesi says the senior positions, which are occupied by some unqualified officials, are of directors, chief directors, deputy directors general, and directors general. He says at national level, they are occupied by more than 1,000 managers, while there are 700 at provincial level. These positions carry no less than 1 million rand a year. The Public Service Accountability Monitor says those responsible for the questionable appointments should be held accountable.
It's high time that these accounting officers and MECs or ministers are exposed and action taken against them to ensure that they face real consequences for their abuse of office and abuse of power.
The DA, which asked the question, says it is concerned about this.
Our take is that if government is truly serious about building a capable, effective and efficient public service administration, then the people at the helm of that public administration must be qualified and experienced.
The Commission says it has received the requisite information from the Department of Public Service and Administration and will, upon verification, share it with Parliament and inform the public.
From the Public Service and Accountability Monitor, I'm joined by research analyst Lindo Velem. Good evening, Ms. Velem. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and thank you for having us.
I'm sure a lot of South Africans are asking themselves, how is this even possible when you have clearly defined roles? Salaries and packages are predetermined. Qualifications, are set out. And by now, I mean, we've been talking about this problem for decades. Why would it still be happening? What is allowing this to continue happening?
Thank you, Vuyo. I think it's political patronage at the forefront of it. People are put in positions because of their political affiliations, which hampers on service delivery dramatically, especially for people on the ground. The people those that are in positions of power are flouting the recruitment policies that are already in place, so that they can put their people in those spaces, so that loyalty is maintained either to political parties or to individuals with the financial incentives.
But how are they getting away with it? Because from the pronouncements that are being made by members of the executive, and I remember, late last year having the Director General of the Public Service and Administration Department, and who was denying that this practice is continuing. In fact, going further to say that they keep on catching people and really doing expelling them, taking them through DCs, and lessons have been learned. In fact, those who dared to try and continue with this practice now are able to, or in fact, think twice. But what this revelation tells us is that, in fact, that's far from the truth.
It is far. I mean, yes, based on the Public Service Commission report, which was done last year, people within government, they're saying that this continues. Qualified individuals are being overlooked for higher positions, and those that know and have the ethical barometer, so to speak, they're not able to stand up for what is right because their own livelihoods are threatened. And so the system continues that they hire people that aren't qualified. And because of that, then nobody is willing to do proper consequence management, which is what is killing our society, because if you are not able to monitor what people are doing within their positions, then we are not able to move forward. It seems as though we're running on this Ferris wheel of sort, and we're not moving forward. No progress is happening in terms of the upskilling of public servants, because those that are at the helm of public service then don't have the requisite qualifications. It said that people in the report, it's reflected that there's a low morale, staff morale that ensues within departments because of these appointments. And people just are demotivated. There's a skills deficit that then happens. And so you get the same kind then of employee who is willing to toe the line, because livelihoods at this stage are under threat, and people would rather be quiet and not report such instances, because those that they report to, they then go to those that are in the executive positions as though they are pointing out whistleblowers. So it continues and it festers within the public service, and it's detrimental, especially to people on the ground. The effects of it, we're not quantifying enough what this means. Our brothers are being killed because now, if the system is not working for them, they resort to criminal activities. There's been a spate of these videos that have been going around where people are being tased with these grass cutters. One man died on top of electricity poles. People are resorting to criminal activities because their basic rights are not met, because the skills in place are not delivering on the human rights that are enshrined in our constitution.
I mean, you have bodies like your Public Service Commission, for example, which, among other things, complains about not having the teeth they need to really help deal with this problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I hate this term because it's used widely, that of political will. I think it's there where decisions have to be taken and effective management of personnel is done so that we can rid the system of those that are not doing their jobs and are unskilled to do those jobs. Consequence management is something that is not upheld because those that are in these positions of power, over 1,800 personnel in director, chief director positions, who then is going to crack the whip if they do not have the prerequisite skills? And it has multiple spin-offs. People are now trying to show or legitimize themselves by buying qualifications, which then puts a whole spin on other things where now higher education spaces are under threat because of this consequence management.
Now, I mean, if, watchdogs like your, Public Service Commission, the Office of the Auditor General aren't able, to, because, I mean, if you compare or contrast, for instance, the demand for more teeth from the Public Service Commission is they're looking at something that would be modeled along the lines of what the Auditor General's office received or got in the last couple of years, but that too, or that arrangement, is yet to deliver the kind of result that many thought it would give once they got those powers. But if those bodies, can't deliver, what they hope to deliver, if there's no political will among both the politicians, whether it's at an executive level or at the legislative level, there's no political will there to crack down on this. What is left then? What are we as ordinary South Africans, what have we not done that we could perhaps leverage on? Because, this is nothing short of a crisis.
Yeah, no, definitely, Voy. As the piece, we look at the social accountability monitoring as a cycle. And so getting involved in the planning spaces of wherever you are, local government, provincial, national, how are we as citizens getting into those spaces and allowing ourselves to be part of the planning process, where there's an exercise of gathering our needs, our socioeconomic needs? Are we feeding into that system? And if not, are we taking the right steps that it then reflects our needs? Personally, I think there's a lot that can be done by citizens and not just left up to civil society in terms of the registered organizations. Today in Omani, there was a standstill. I have never seen that kind of mobilization in a small town. People are starting to awake up or to to wake up to the reality that if we don't take up our role within the system of social accountability, then things will fall. We can't even trust at times, because now budgets are made according to the needs on the ground. We can't even trust the budgets that are out there, because we don't know if the right checks and balances were done because of the skills that are not in place. And so it is up to us as citizens to stand up and say, actually, this is what is on the ground, and this is what needs to be reflected in how things are done within within the public administration. And so back to your question, what is there for us to do? It's to get involved. Find spaces, find information where we can then press for the right skills to be put in place.
We have less than a minute left, but I want to explore that, because I mean, protests are one thing, right? And of course, I mean, every citizen has a right to protest, but also to guard against unintended consequences, like where property gets destroyed, or there's threat or cost of life and limb and so on. But just other creative ways. What do other people, or what has worked? I'm thinking aloud here. I mean, in the past, I mean, people have taken to the courts, I mean, litigation has helped us in quite a number of respects. But what else is there? In other words, when you say get involved, do what exactly? And I'm not putting in a sport. I'm just,
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of other things that we've been doing in the past. I think mostly it's around the procurement space, especially within local government, where people can get involved. There are very clear prescripts on how people can get involved in that space, and looking at the services that are delivered. Are they what they were meant to be, or what was stipulated in the service delivery agreements that were signed between municipalities and service providers? There are such tools that we've been using, like the social audit tool and the community scorecard, so that our views on certain issues that we find in our communities are put to the fore, that we don't just protest, that there's a paper trail to our activism, and that we are taking part in the governance system within our localities. We have the monitoring and evaluation that communities can do within their spaces. Yes, the Auditor General has some teeth, some powers, but not necessarily. We have not yet seen it within the local government space. But as I personally, I feel that we can get to a point where these powers are exercised with the numbers of people. Otherwise, if it's just on paper and nobody is taking it up, it will just remain there, and we will maintain the rut that we are in. We will not move post what is currently here today, and progressively realize our capabilities tomorrow. And within a system where we don't have the skilled labor, we are not able to move on. And it's high time that as communities and as citizens, we wake up to that. And obviously people can see it within their spaces. But what are we doing? What are we doing? Are we voting the same people in? Is cater deployment still a policy that must exist? What are we, the people, saying? Yes, the DA put it up, but what has been the backing from citizens?
Let's leave it there for this evening. Thanks very much for your time. Linda Guhle Willems is a research analyst with the Public Service and Accountability Monitor, an organization that has over the years earned its stripes for being active in this space. I remember back in the day when they used to come up with reports about what was happening in various spheres of governance, and those reports opened the eyes of many people, exposed quite a lot of wrong, and we need more of that on the back of this revelation by the Public Service and Administration Minister that the state has almost 2,000 unqualified top public servants who are earning upwards of 1 million rands each a year as directors general, deputy directors general, and chief directors. It's something that needs to stop. That's where we're also going to stop for this evening. Do join us again tomorrow night, same time.